Everybody, welcome to this episode of the Psychology of Wellbeing. This is a series dedicated to the underpinnings of health and wellness. So beyond food and fitness, there are other things that go on in our lives that really can undermine our efforts to be well. So I have invited mental health professionals to join me in this series, and we're going deep on some conversations. And before we get started, and before I introduce our guest today, I want to send a special thanks to our sponsor, CoSpace, KHOSpace.com, which is a brand new office space for practitioners. So Halley actually is a client here, and she is able to facilitate her counseling sessions, come in. She has a beautiful space to use. And while she's building her practice, if she's not in a position yet to have 40 clients every single week and need to pay rent, you can come into a space like this and still have a great experience. So check them out, cospace.com. And now let me introduce you to Halley Carmack. She is a counselor and also, as I mentioned, a member here at CoSpace. And your specialty is really on childhood development, which we're going to talk today about how to raise a confident child, which is so important. So Halley, why don't you just tell everybody a little bit about yourself, and then we will jump in.
Yeah, so thanks for inviting me here today. I'm really excited to be able to talk about this. So I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and my specialty is in infant and early childhood mental health. So primarily I see kids from as early as birth, really, through age 7. And my focus in my practice is to use evidence-based treatment. So my hope is that when I can get started with a family, I can say, if we do this, this will work. And I find that provides a lot of hope for folks.
Nice. Well, let's just jump in then. And I'll start with a little bit of personal history on myself. I was a very young mother. I got pregnant at 21. I was a senior in college, and I did the right thing and got married. And 4 years later, I had a second child. Mm-hmm. There was part of me that I know and fully believe I was a good mom. I was a good parent, but I also know there was part of me that wasn't always present with my kids. And I was a little resentful, not of them in particular, but the fact that I felt like I had to put my career on hold. And so I know that one of the things we want to talk about is the role that a parent plays early in a child's development that has the potential to impact them. And I have a good relationship with both of my kids today. And I told them, when you're in the 30s and you have to go to counseling, I'm happy to go with you.
Right.
Talk a little bit about, everybody has a story like mine. They're all different. We do the best that we can, but it's such a monumental and important time. Can you talk a little bit about those early formative years?
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe 100% that parents are always doing the best with what they have. Mm-hmm. And what is something that's really important in my practice is the idea that we can break cycles and we can break patterns, but it takes a lot of intentionality. So when you're, especially I think a young parent, you're parenting based on instinct mostly. And so you're parenting how you were parented. And so if as a new parent, you had a mom or a dad who was really involved, really attentive, then you're more likely to be that way. If you didn't have that growing up, which I think, now there are all sorts of generational differences and the value or the way that parenting has been either valued or devalued has changed over time. So, these generational patterns continue. I think with parents in this new generation, there's so much more awareness of, I do want to be like my mom or I don't. I liked this aspect of how I was parented, but I want to do this differently. And so I think that in the early years, what we're doing is laying the foundation for how a child is going to think about themselves and think about the world. There are different psychologists over time have different theories about child development. One of them is that there are these salient questions that are asked and answered during different times of development. So for example, from 0 to 1, the big question that the child is having answered is, am I safe? Will my needs be met? And so that, that sort of ties into all the debate around, do you let a child cry it out? How much do you let babies cry? All that kind of stuff. But the idea is that
so birth to 1, even though you don't have a conscious memory, it how we're treated in that time can impact who we are, even if it's 30, 40, 50 years later.
Absolutely. Yeah. From the period from 0 to 3 there, I'm going to get this number wrong, but it's something insane, like 10 million, 10 billion neurons are connected every second in the brain. And so if all of the connections are around, I cry, somebody comes to get me, I'm fed when I'm hungry, somebody helps me calm down, somebody helps me go to sleep, versus nobody is there to help me meet my needs, then the wiring in the brain is going to be really different.
Okay.
So early on, it's about the physical needs being met, including closeness and
nurturing, cuddling, a sense of warmth, heartbeat.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's one of the really cool things about early development in particular, but I think this continues through the lifespan, that when a baby is upset, fussing, crying, and they're breathing quickly, their heart rate is quick, when they're picked up and held against the mother, their heartbeats sink. So if the mother is able to keep herself calm, then the baby's heart will slow and to match the mother's. And I think that's something that can be like extrapolated almost to most interactions going forward between parents. If a child is having really big feelings and the parent has really big feelings, and the kid doesn't have a chance to co-regulate with the parent. And co-regulation just means the being able to calm themselves with the help of their caregiver.
So birth to one, really, it sounds like, if you're a parent and you're overwhelmed or you're really not sure what to do, it's really about responsiveness to physical and emotional needs in that moment. So you don't have to buy them the fancy swing or the nice little headband or, all that other stuff that makes you probably feel good.
Yeah.
But for a baby, really, birth to one, just be there. Take care of them, change their diaper, feed them, make sure they know they're warm, loved, and supported. And that will help set an emotional stability for their next phase.
Absolutely. When in doubt, snuggle.
I love that.
Yeah.
I think I did okay in that area. Like I
good.
Birth to one, I think my kids definitely, they didn't sit around in dirty diapers, and they were always well fed. They were actually very chunky monkeys. So good. But okay. And then what about other caregivers' roles? So I am fortunate enough now I'm a grandparent. And I will say there's been a huge transition in like just who I am today as a human being versus who I was at 21 years old and having a baby. And I can look at my little grandson Emerson and just consciously be present with him. And I have all the patience in the world. In fact, my daughter says, "How come you didn't have patience like that with us?" I don't know. I'm a grandparent. Yeah. What's the role that kind of that second tier of caregivers can give to create a confident child?
So before I get into that, I want to just say that if you were 21 when you got pregnant, your brain wasn't even fully developed. So you can tell her that next time. Like your brain wasn't developed until your mid-20s. So you were doing the best you could.
I was a child raising a child.
Exactly. Yeah. So as a grandparent, your brain's fully developed. You have a lot more skills. I am very much a believer in it takes a village. I think that the more loving, supportive adults a child can have around them, the better. Because then they're having more opportunity to hear that they are great, that there will always be somebody to take care of them, that they, trying new experiences. And I think that because parenting is a 24-hour job, if the moms and dads can have some backup in the form of aunties or grandparents or whoever else to give them some time that they can take care of themselves, they're going to do a better job of taking care of their kids. So, so I think it's great if you have the support and it's positive. I think the one thing to say is that the more, just as in moms and dads co-parenting, if moms and dads and grandmas and grandpas can all be on the same page, that's ideal.
Right.
It can be tricky sometimes.
Yeah, that could be really tricky. And I've been, personally speaking from personal experience here is, you never stop being a parent. Like my son is 30, my daughter's 26, and I still feel like I'm their mom. But, when my daughter got pregnant and had her baby, I knew I needed to just let her be mom and me not try to either be mom to him or over mom her, so I hopefully do that. So she knows that I'm there as a resource and supportive and unconditional loving, and create an environment like that. But I'm not the meddling sort of, you need to know this.
Did you ever have a conversation with her about that, about your realization that you were trying to make sure that you sort of stayed in your lane?
I don't know. I don't think I have specifically communicated that to her. Do you think that would be a value to communicate that to her specifically like that?
I mean, I think there's a lot of value in just talking about these efforts that we're making, because I think that when we verbalize them, it's one of the best ways that we can model that for others. So if you said, for example, I've been doing a lot of reflecting on like what it was like when I was a mom, and now changing into my role as a grandma and trying to be really mindful of how I'm interacting with you guys to be as supportive as I can be, then that invites her to, she's like, well, what can I reflect on? My mom's been reflecting on this. Maybe I can reflect on this part about my parenting. And if you open up and say, I'm still trying to figure out how to be your best mom, then that might give her the message that like, this is a safe place where we can talk about these roles, and the fact that there are some instinctual parts to it, but there are some really intentional things that we can do to be the best we can. And I think that trickles down too to them with little kids. I think it's super useful to acknowledge when we're not our best person in front of our children, and to say like, mommy got really frustrated and I wasn't the boss of my feelings, and next time I'm going to do this to help myself stay calm, or I'm sorry that I raised my voice. That's not how it didn't feel good to me, and I know it didn't feel good to you, so being willing to acknowledge things with our kids, because then they know what to do if they make a mistake. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's great. What do you feel like, or what do you see in your practice as being the major disruptors to confidence? So do you see themes in parenting that cause that relationship to get off track or to start to cause damage in a child? Can you just talk about those for a bit, just so people can, not to focus on the negative, but what are those things that cause problem?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the sort of opposite of confidence is anxiety, I think, in most situations. And that's something that kids have modeled by their parents. But I think that inconsistency is one of the biggest disruptors to confidence and builds anxiety, I think, for most kids. So for example, most of early childhood is about risk taking. Like, it's a risk when kids stand up for the first time and they're going to fall down. It's a risk when they go up on to climb up the slide to come down the first time. So if they know that their caregiver will be there when they're taking a new risk, they're much more likely to be willing to try new things and learn new things and make friends and go to a dance class and separate from their parent, because they have a sense of security and stability in that relationship. And so it allows them to have more confidence. If they're not sure if their caregiver will be there for them, then they're much more likely to be clingy and to have trouble separating, which is the early childhood form of not having confidence. So it all comes back to, how safe am I in my relationship, and how much can I count on my person? And depending on the family structure, that could be that mom could be the person, dad could be the person. If the kid is living with grandparents, grandma can be the person. What we know from research is that children really only need one safe, stable, loving relationship with an adult, and it can be anyone. But kids do need that one person that they know they can always count on.
Yeah. It's got your back no matter what. Unconditional love.
Exactly. Yeah.
Let's talk about the big D a little bit. So obviously, divorces can be one of those groundbreaking sort of, creating dysfunction. What would be your top level advice for parents who are moving through divorce? Because I've seen it all the way from very amicable and supportive of the process to both parties really using the children to attack and undermine the other person because of their own anger and resentments and jealousies. What would be your top tips to parents who are going through a separation or divorce to keep those kids stable and confident?
Yeah. So routine is really important. I mean, I think, on the ideal end of things, if there is an amicable separation and they're still hoping to co-parent, then having similar routines across households, similar behavioral expectations, so it doesn't feel like whiplash going back and forth between households. It's really, really important for parents as much as possible to not say negative things about each other.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons why that's so important is that in early childhood, it's not going to be a conscious thing as much, but as children age, they are understanding that they are part their mother and part their father. And if either one of those halves is wrong, negative, crazy, whatever might have been said by the other parent, that means something is wrong with them too. It has to be. They're part of me. I'm part of them. So if you are wanting to support your child's sense of confidence, then it has to remain true that they are good because their parents are good. And then lastly, I would just say that this is another one of those things that's important to talk about. Like, one of my favorite, Mr. Rogers, is like one of my heroes, and he has a quote that's something about anything that's, I'm going to mess it up, but essentially that anything that is human is manageable and anything is manageable we can talk about, something along those lines. So one of the things that's often misconstrued or misunderstood about early childhood development in little kids is that they're so little, they don't understand what's happening around them. But we need to talk about it. So even for little ones, like, mommy and daddy aren't going to be living together anymore. You're going to be with mommy sometimes, daddy sometimes. Mommy and daddy both love you very much. We're not living together. It's not about you is a really big message, because kids internalize all of that. They're very egocentric. So they think that they're responsible for everything that happens.
Right. Which is unfortunate because they're so, they're babies.
Yeah. It's a lot of weight to carry if you think that your parents aren't living together anymore because of you.
Mm-hmm. I can remember I was divorced. My ex-husband had remarried, and I always tried to take the high road. Like,
yeah.
And again, I'm many years down the road, and my kids would come back and say certain things that had been said, and I didn't let it ignite me,
Yeah.
and because I knew it just needed to be diffused. So
Right.
when one of the examples was my daughter came home, and they were a week with dad, a week with me, a week with dad, a week with me. And she said, "Mom, did you wear your party dress?" And I said, what party dress, honey? And she goes, when you went out with your friends and partied all night, did you wear your party dress? And I was like, yes, honey. Yes, I did. I had a very good party. Take the high road. Yeah, there's definitely these moments I remember, and anybody going through a divorce or separation or even long-term breakup, you're going to have these moments, and it doesn't really matter. You always have to put your kids first. Like, that's part of your job and part of your obligation. And I can remember he had gotten remarried, and my daughter, who was probably 5 or 6 years old, she would come to me, and I could tell she didn't really want to talk about her stepmom. She was very hesitant. And, part of me was like, I just wanted her to feel confident in talking about a relationship that she was trying to establish without feeling like she was doing damage to me in some way. And so I told her that, love is infinite. It's not like a piece of pie, and you take out a piece of pie and then, you give it out, and all of a sudden one day you run out of pie. That, she can love me, she can love her brother, she can love her dad, she can love her stepmom, she can love as many people as she wants, and she will never run out. Like, she doesn't take away to give to her. And so I wanted her to feel that sense that it is okay to love somebody else, even if you feel like it's going to hurt your other parent or their competition or something. So,
yeah,
that's the way I could, I could visualize it in that moment. But I think it was a valuable lesson for me, and hopefully for her too, that, love is really infinite. So
well done. You just came up with that?
I did.
That's amazing. That's really amazing. I mean, that brings up something that's really important, which is that they're, parent-child relationships are not meant to be equal. So especially with little kids, they cannot control their feelings. Their feelings are too big. They don't have the resources for it yet. And we don't really expect kids to be able to use coping skills, for example, independently until late elementary school. So if we're talking about a really little kid, they need you to help them. And so in some ways you can be in charge of their feelings for them, but kids should never be in charge of their parents' feelings. And so you gave her such a gift in that moment, because if she was coming to you worried about your feelings, then you gave her the message, I'm in charge of my feelings, I can handle it. And the secondary lesson of there's enough love for everybody to go around. So I think that's lovely. You did a great job.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about viewing your parents as superheroes. So obviously children look up to us, and in your words, we're almost like superheroes to them. What are the most important things as superheroes that we do for our kids, and are there differences in different age brackets?
Yeah. So one of the things that this comes up a lot when life has gone in a way that's unexpected. So for example, the way that kids view their parents as superheroes is that they, if it's raining on my birthday, it's because mom wanted it to rain, and right. And she could make it stop raining if she wanted, like that. Yeah. And so if something happens, like a parent dies, for example, or somebody dies that's close to the family, then it's important for children to realize that there's an end to that power. But also it's really complicated in early childhood in some ways, because they also need to believe in the parental shield, that their parent really can keep them safe from anything. Mm-hmm. And as adults, we know that's a fallacy. We know that if we send our kids to school, they're outside of our vision, anything can happen. I mean, we also
eyes off of them in a supermarket, and yeah.
And I mean, I've heard insane stories of kids playing in their front yard. They're at home with their parents, and a car comes into the yard, something horrific. And so there are absolutely boundaries to the parental power, but kids have to feel like it's there no matter what. And so I think part of that is you really can lean into that as a parent. Like it's actually helpful for their development for kids to believe that you will keep them safe, that you're in charge. But then I think it's that piece of like talking about it if it's something that really is outside of your control. Like mommy didn't want grandma to die either. Right. And grandma didn't want to leave us, but grandma died and her body broke. And so there are ways that we talk to little kids about things. And so especially as you were talking about divorce, I think that there are parts of parenting when you have a normal child and nothing stressful happens is hard enough. But when you're trying to parent through a particularly stressful situation or something unforeseen, I think that's the time when you reach out to a clinician, because they're just not books on that as much,
Well, and every situation is probably very, very unique, depending on how every party is playing, what role they're playing, and how they're responding, and their own mental health,
Yeah, and their history. And so what happened when I was a kid, I'm being reminded of that now, and I don't know how to handle my own child. Or, I mean, going back to the idea of divorce, and when your child reminds you of your ex, and you didn't like that part of them having to deal with those feelings. So yeah, I think it's just complicated.
Well, I know that you bring up a good point. I'm going to ask you a personal question now. So I know that my daughter, or my ex-husband, always felt like my daughter reminded him of me too much. And so he would make, oh, you're just like your mom, or oh, this, that, but he would make it a negative. And then she would come and say something to me, and I'm like, well, that is such a huge compliment.
Right.
Oh my God, you should be so happy about that. But really, what does that, obviously that was me trying to counteract something that was negative. What does that do to a child to be compared to a parent in a negative way?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think that it does take an intentional kind of counterbalance. So if dad used a word that seemed pejorative in some way, like, well, you know, you're just like your mom, you
Which probably happens a lot, right? I mean, even
yeah,
in healthy relationships. Oh, you're just like your dad when you do that. I can't stand that.
yeah, right. But when you're an adult, you can you can separate it out and be like, well, that's
Right.
their stuff. When you're a child, you can't so much. So I think that it's, well, you know, daddy still has some big feelings about, about, you know, his relationship with mommy. When daddy says that you're really loud, just like mommy, I think that, it's one of my favorite things about me, because that means that if I need help, I can always ask for help. Like, my voice is something that's really important to me. And I do see that you're just like me in that way. So it's like having the space for that really honest conversation. And you know, you can say like, that's daddy's thing, that's okay. And it's sort of about your delivery. Like, you even hear my voice like, well, that's daddy's thing, you know.
Right. Inside you're thinking one
Right.
thing, out is something different, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, that's so daddy can have his feelings, but this is how I think about it.
Mm.
So offering a different perspective, and then the child can do what they want with that information. But the more they hear the positive attribution, the more powerful that will be. I did, you know, I think there's some common knowledge about the fact that it takes something like 7 positive interactions to counteract 1 negative interaction.
Wow. Interesting.
So it takes a lot of effort on the part of a parent to try to rework the negative experiences a child has, but it's absolutely possible. And it's just, I think that's one of the things that's challenging with little ones, is that they're going through all these stages of mastery. And so that's why kids want to read the same book a million times, watch the same movie a million times. And so they will ask you the same question a million times. And part of that is just to see if that's still the answer, because that creates a sense of safety too. Oh, mom said that yesterday. She says it again today. Okay, I'm probably going to ask her later today too, just to see. But yeah, and so they know what's coming. It creates safety, and they feel like they have some mastery over it because they already know the answer. So even when that gets annoying, if it's kind of heart related issues, then always answer that question again. It's okay. Just say it again.
Yeah.
So, you know, for with divorce, for example, the repeating, you go to daddy's house, and then you'll talk to mommy on the phone when you're at daddy's house, and then you'll come home from daddy's house. And when you're here, you'll talk to daddy on the phone, you know, like you'll get to see mommy again. You'll see your friends again. You get to take this stuffy with you. Just repeating.
Like creating stability in the instability that exists in, you know, a
Exactly.
situation like that. But
Yeah.
right, well, let's I have one more question, and then we'll kind of wrap up our conversation. But so if somebody is in a situation, whatever it is, divorce, bad, you know, trying to be a single mom and just feeling overwhelmed, what are those steps that somebody can take if they realize, you know what, I really can't manage this on my own? So I've watched some videos, read some books, I need help. What are those steps that somebody can take regardless of where they live to seek help? And then we'll talk a little bit about how they can reach you to work with you directly.
Yeah. So I think what's really common is for people to talk to their pediatrician about it first. Pediatric offices usually have a sense of what services are available in the community, but not always. And depending on where you are in the country, there might be more or fewer options for early childhood mental health in particular. But what is available to everybody is like the therapy directories, like Psychology Today, for example. There's Good Therapy, Therapy Den, where you can log on and you can filter by your insurance, by age group, that kind of thing, and get a sense of what's available in your community. So that is usually a good place for people to start when they're looking for somebody. But I oftentimes recommend that people go and talk to their pediatrician first. When I'm thinking about, I mean, there's a couple of things to think about. One is that if a parent is feeling like they're just overwhelmed, then maybe what they really need is their own treatment. And maybe it's not about the kid at all, because there certainly is a trickle down effect. And so if the parent is not coping with their own feelings well, if they're not being supported and prioritizing their own mental health, their own physical health, then it's not that it doesn't matter, but their interventions with their child won't be as effective.
Right.
And I think it's a beautiful thing to be able to model for your children that asking for help is okay.
Mm.
And so mommy goes to see a helper. Mommy goes to see a helper who helps with making my body feel calm and my mind quiet and to be a better mommy. So I think that's great. So I think one is trying to figure out if it's really that the child needs intervention, if it's really parenting help, or if it's really just mom help and support that way.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that a lot of times, even this, since they're free to everybody, the like mom groups on Facebook can be really supportive, just for that sense of I'm not alone in this.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
it's hard, and it's hard for everyone. And I would caution folks against this is probably going to get some hate, but like the Instagram mommies who like have all their stuff together.
Right. All the pretty pictures.
It's not real. It's really not
real.
And I think that just encouraging moms to be gentle on themselves. Like one of the treatments that I do, I feel so strongly about this. One of the treatments that I do is historically, when I was working in a clinic, it has a two-way mirror. So when there are two parents in the family, there would be like a child and a parent playing on one side and one of the parents sitting with me on the other side. In order for the child not to see, we sit in the dark on the other side of the mirror. So it's me and a parent, we're sitting in the dark. And so many times I've had parents say, like, these behind the mirror confessions is how I call them, like, I don't like parenting this kid. I didn't know that parenting was going to be like this,
Right.
And there isn't a lot of space in our culture to have those feelings. Children
Right.
are miracles. Parenting is amazing. And yes, those things are true, but the majority of the time it's not how you imagined it was going to be. And so I hope for there to be more spaces for parents to be really real about what it's like to be a parent and how hard it really is.
It is hard. I mean, I'm on the back end. Like I said, I have a 30 and a 26-year-old. So it is hard and it goes on for the rest of your life.
Yeah. Right.
You're ready. Yeah, I think about adopting a cat and I'm like, I'll have a cat, whatever, 15 to 20 life.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. So let's allow some space for the negative feelings about parenting to be true.
Yeah.
But also it doesn't have to be that hard. And I think that when parents start to when that becomes the primary feeling, like, I didn't want this, I don't like this, there is help for that. And so going to a therapy directory, reaching out to somebody like me, I think that's where we can be helpful.
Let's talk about that. So talk a little bit about the personal work that you do. And I've got your website up here so everybody would be able to reach you. What type of work do you do and who are you looking to work with?
Sure. Thanks. So I think I said earlier that my practice foundation is on evidence-based treatments. So I think one of the things I believe strongly in is that I've done all of the training and the reading and all the practicing and whatever, so parents can come to me to find out exactly what's going to work for their child instead of reading another parenting book. Most of the parents that I've worked with have a whole stack on their nightstand and none of it is working for their child. So I see a range. I mean, I like to think that I can cure whatever ails you in early childhood. So if pretty much anything is happening between 0 and 7, I can help with it. Okay. I do like sort of strictly behavioral treatment. So the kids who have big tantrums, spit, bite, kick, punch, throw things, break stuff, those are my specialty, close to my heart. And we can do that through telehealth too, since this is an insane time. Yeah. And not on the flip side, but also I do a lot of work with kids who have anxiety, who experience some kind of trauma. So kids where they have experienced a death, there's been a scary accident, even like separation from their parents that might have happened in a scary way, but also just, divorce is a stressor, and that can be something that I can be really helpful with as well. Mm-hmm. There is a lot of great information on my website. So I tried to, even in like my FAQ page, I tried to be really thorough in terms of how do you explain to your kid they're going to go see a helper? What kind of language can you use with them in prepping for the first session? What am I going to say to them when I meet them? So, and then one of the other things that I think is somewhat unique about my practice, especially in private practice, is that I use a lot of standardized assessment measures. So I want to be able to track that what we're doing is actually working. I think a lot of times in therapy, there's this sense of, well, I think things are sort of feeling better. I think, well, I want a number. Let's run the number. Let's see if the number is lower. Yeah, exactly. Let's get a graph out. I'm like super nerdy in that way. So, yeah, I mean, I think that if there's, I'm looking to work with a parent who believes that it doesn't have to be this hard, and who knows they're not alone, even if that's how they feel. Well,
that's awesome. Thank you so much for joining us here today. You can reach Halley directly through her website, halleycarmack.com. And I want to thank everybody for joining us for today's episode of the Psychology of Wellbeing. I am looking for other great mental health professionals to interview. You can reach me here, Debra K at wellworld.tv. And if you're interested in hosting your own series or up-leveling and sharing your voice in a bigger way, we help develop the next media star. So reach out to me and let's get you going. All right. We'll see you next time.
Thanks.
Bye.